Hi, my name is David Schultz, and today I'm going to be talking to you about social capital in educational systems. I'm going to begin by defining social capital and talking about positive and negative types of social capital, and then I'm going to apply social capital theory to educational systems. So to begin, we can define social capital as a resource embedded within networks of social interaction. In this sense, social capital is produced by relationships between individuals. This could be between a parent and a child, parents and teachers, or in different community members. But it's important to note that all of these consist of some aspect of social structures, as well as the fact that they facilitate certain actions. And this is something that Coleman points out in his seminal work, The Social Capital in the Production of Human Capital, on page 98. Coleman also specifies three different types of social capital, the first being obligations and expectations, which depend upon the trustworthiness of the social environment. For instance, whether or not a loan will be paid back, in terms of reciprocity between a banker and a person that's seeking a loan. The second type are information networks, which are a capacity of a social structure to facilitate the transfer of information between individuals. So this could be between a parent and a teacher about a student's performance, it could be about a business opportunity between two community members. And then finally, you have norms and sanctions, which incentivize and decentivize certain actions within a certain social structure. It's also important to note, as Bryan, Thomas, Vines, and McCoy point out on page 190 of Social Counselors as Social Capital, School Counselors as Social Capital, that such ties in social capital can be viewed at the micro level in terms of personal relationships between family members, teachers, or community members, or at the macro level in terms of social networks and institutions like churches, schools, and communities as a whole. So both an individual and a community can activate a form of social capital to perform a certain action. And ultimately, the process by which social interactions facilitate the development of social capital is between individuals and in interactions between these individuals in terms of relationships. But again, this can exist at the macro level or at the micro level. So now I'm going to talk about negative and positive social capital. Simply put, positive social capital can be viewed as a type of social capital that increases the likelihood of favorable outcomes in education, health, economics, politics, or any other arena. Good examples of this that Coleman points out in Social Capital and the Production of Human Capital on page 102 are rotating credit associations, in which multiple individuals put money into a pot, which goes to each individual only at one time, and then that individual has to pay it back in the pot, and then it goes to the next individual. And there's reciprocity in these relationships in terms of obligations and expectations, as well as another example he gives are vendors in Cairo, who bring each other customers and have very specific norms within the marketplace. In each of these cases, there's a trustworthiness and there's a different extent of the obligations involved that requires a different level of social capital. And through these interactions between vendors, entrepreneurs, and lenders, networks of trust and obligations form, which create a reciprocal structure through which benefits in social capital are derived. Now, conversely, negative social capital increases the likelihood of unfavorable outcomes in each of the aforementioned arenas. And oftentimes, negative social capital can perpetuate disadvantages that already exist. In LeQuant's paper on negative social capital and the state breakdown in Americans' urban core on page 29, he notes that public institutions operate as negative social capital that maintain ghetto residents in a marginal and dependent position. He gives the example of welfare, in which clients are meant to feel expendable, interchangeable, and a burden to all. And through this negative social capital, people develop a sense of learned helplessness, and ultimately it's disadvantageous and it promotes unfavorable outcomes. The norms and sanctions in this welfare system represent negative social capital, as tensions are created between state agents and recipients, and in that tension there are negative outcomes. Now I'm going to apply social capital theory to educational systems and talk about the impact of social capital on educational outcomes. In regard to academic achievement, students are able to activate social capital through their families, through schools, and through communities. And Coleman on page 118 and 119 of Social Capital and the Production of Human Capital showed that both in social capital in the family and outside of it, through the adult community surrounding the school, there was evidence that considerable value was in social capital in terms of reducing the probability of dropping out of high school. So here there's a clear relationship between social capital in the family as well as in the community and potentially in the schools and academic achievement. Now I'm going to break down social capital's effects on academic achievement based on the family, the community, and through social capital in schools. I'm going to start by talking about social capital in the family. This is considered the closest and most powerful influence on most students. Defer, Parcel, and Troutman in Does Capital at Home Matter More Than Capital at School? Social Capital's Effects on Academic Achievement found that family social capital exerts stronger effects on academic achievement than does school social capital. This may be because of the amount of time that families spend together, because of the fact that families are able to provide resources both in and out of school in terms of helping students through support in school and then supporting them outside of school through structured activities. However, although there's a stronger effect of family social capital, there's also many differences in terms of availability of social capital in different families, and this typically falls along differences in socioeconomic status. In that same paper by Defer, Parcel, and Troutman on page 3, they showed that poor parents were far less likely to schedule activities for their children, and they were less assertive in their children's education in comparison to middle-class parents who were much more active in their child's education and scheduled more structured activities for them. In this sense, the social capital available in a middle-class family promoted higher academic achievement, and the social capital in the in the working-class families could be viewed as negative social capital because it promoted negative outcomes in schools. It is also important to note that there's also a relationship between the social capital in the school and the social capital in a family. Goddard notes in his paper Relational Networks, Social Trust, and Norms that when information about our children's efforts and successes in school were shared with parents, they were more likely to engage with children about their efforts in school. So in this case, the social capital in the school in terms of information networks between the school and the parents impacted the amount of social capital that the parent was willing to provide for the child through support. In this sense, if policies that improve school social capital are implemented, this may also impact family social capital as well. Moving on to social capital in the community, we can differentiate this form of social capital from family social capital in that it's collectively owned and available through community-based organizations. On page 406 of Sun's article, The Contextual Effects of Community Social Capital on Academic Performance, she notes that the community social capital is mostly available through community-based organizations and activities such as churches, organized sports, and recreational activities. The availability of social capital through these different mechanisms has an important effect on educational outcomes. On page 423 of Sun's article, she notes that certain community structures block the formation of interpersonal ties and hinder the capacity of the community to mobilize institutional resources to serve educational purposes. This may refer to differences in socioeconomic status and the availability of, for instance, funds in a neighborhood for a park, for summer programs, or other different structures and opportunities for community social capital to be produced. It has been brought up by critics that socioeconomic status could explain the effects of community social capital on academic achievement as opposed to social capital, but in Sun's paper she also noted on page 423 that after socioeconomic status was controlled for, the contextual effects of community social capital on academic achievement were still apparent. Now, talking about social capital in schools, as I noted before, there was a connection between school social capital and family social capital, and Defer, Parcel, and Troutman also note that the relationships between parents and children that form between school teachers and personnel can have an important impact on academic achievement. In this sense, the amount of family social capital that a student has access to in terms of their parent support or availability to come to school may impact the relationships with teachers and school personnel, and thus the school social capital as well. However, there is also a potential for schools to make up for lack of community or family social capital or negative social capital. In a paper by Defer, Parcel, and Troutman on page 5, they noted that high-quality schools can partly compensate for poor parental attachment and low parental involvement in schools. As I noted before in the section on family social capital is still more important and has more of an impact on students' academic achievement, but if there is high school social capital, this can counteract some of the impacts of negative social capital in the family. However, there's also the potential for schools to perpetuate inequalities through negative social capital. In a paper by Brian, Thomas, Vines, and McCoy on school counselors as social capital, they noted that students whose parents had contact with the school about academic and behavior problems were less likely to apply to college. So in this case, the school social capital in terms of the information network between a parent and the school actually had a negative impact on their academic outcomes. They also noticed, or Brian, Holcomb, Vines, and Thomas also noted that Hispanic students who did not have any contact with their counselors were more likely to apply to 2 or more colleges. So again, this shows that there may be a form of negative social capital in the school that may perpetuate inequalities that are found in family social capital or resource availability in the home. However, despite these issues in the availability of social capital, there's also clearly the potential for policy to improve the availability of social capital in the family, in the community, in the home, through increasing funding for schools, for community initiatives, or for welfare for families. There is the potential for policy to have a major impact on the availability of social capital and the ability of that social capital to be activated through the schools. Further research needs to be done to show how these policies can be implemented and how they may affect social capital. Thank you.